Hello and welcome to today's race. My name's ArbieG and today we're racing on Suzuka Circuit. Group 3 is the restriction and we're currently just watching the qualifying lap, which I didn't put in the last video but I thought I'd include it into this one. So yeah, we're racing Group 3. I'm racing in the Lexus RSF. I did try a few cars going through practice and a different few ones. I found this one was the one car I can get the best sort of lap times out of. However, when I did check the top 10, none of them had this car, so perhaps maybe not the best choice, but personally this is what I was getting the best times out of. So as you can see here, we're coming now to a Degner curve, which used to be sort of one turn, and I believe some time ago, maybe 15 years ago, they turned it into two, as you saw there. So just completed the second section of the lap, coming round into the hairpin turn. So in the last race, I turned off the traction control, and I found that sort of I was able to get a bit more times out my lap and all that kind of stuff. When playing through this one, anytime I turned off traction control, I just couldn't seem to either put in a reliable lap or sort of achieve any kind of consistency. So contrary to maybe what the advice should be, I have turned on the traction control ever so slightly just to give me a little bit grip, especially through those through that S-bend there. So previously to this, I'd done a lot of practice up until this point. I know we're only seeing 3 laps there on the right hand side, but I'd done quite a few different practice sessions, and I was trying to beat a 2:03.7, which was my current best lap time at the time I was running this race, this qualifying session. So I come through there at a 2:03.6, so I'd sort of made a bit of a gain there, and I was happy with that as my qualifying time. So with that qualifying time, we can go and look at a couple of races that took part. So here you can see a qualification for 6th. About 3 seconds behind the guy in front of me, and about 7 seconds ahead the guy behind me, which when I saw that, I thought is, my best target here is trying to maintain the position I've got. So with the 3 second a lap lead on the car in front, and the 7 seconds a lap difference between behind me, really means that I should just have a nice and comfortable a gap to sit in there. I could really try and push and try and see if I can catch up in 5th and take on the Belgium, but when you're seeing that bit, sort of that larger gap between the pace that's been set beforehand, it's outside of someone making any huge like mistakes, it's a really hard gap to try and close off over a 4-lap race. So I'm finding more and more as I play this in comparative to other games I've played. I don't know whether it's my skill or whether I'm a little bit too cautious, but overtaking, all that kind of stuff, because you're only running 4-lap races, or I'm only running 4-lap races at the time, kind of quite hard to get the overtakes in and stuff like that, because the opportunities very rarely arise, just like in normal racing. So 9 times out of 10, I'm finding my aim at the minute is just trying to achieve some sort of a consistency, and making sure I'm not making any huge errors and not smashing anyone off the track or anything like that. So not necessarily focus so much on massive speed, but just staying on the track, staying consistent. So you can see here, as I said, I'm kind of holding 6th place. Already pulled a little bit of a gap between myself and the Italian in a 7th place. Currently trying to close a bit of the gap on the Belgium in 5th. But he's also made a little bit of a gap as well. Here, I have put a couple of clips on the recorded gameplay in there, because you'll see they'll have at the time deltas on the left hand side, which sort of tells me how big the gaps are between the person in front of me and the person behind me. I've included a few shots of them so we can have a look and see what the gaps are at certain times throughout the race. So we're coming now round to what's called Spoon Curve. Here I often slip down to 2 when I know race wise, when I watch some of the better laps, they in this car they very rarely slip down to 2, they always slipped into 3, so something I tried to train myself out with, but obviously still in some of the bad habits I picked up earlier in my practice. So now we're coming up to a Casio triangle, a really hard and tight chicane towards the end of the lap. But as you can see, kind of what I saw at the strategy as a start, I build a lot of my strategy looking at the qualification times, which I know is not probably perfect, because you get some people who don't even have a qualification time. They're just literally quite happy to sit at the back of the pack and work their way up, so they're a bit unknown whether or not they're going to creep up on you. But in general, you know, people have put a bit of work into their qualification times. So you can see here, just again maintaining that 6th place onto our second lap, coming through the S-curves, which everything on this track, I found these S-curves the hardest. This is where you lose or gain a lot of time on the lap, as you're having to sort of play with the throttle quite a lot through that one. So we're coming up through a Dunlop curve now. Again, quite hard to read sometimes, but in general not as hard as the S-curves. A Degner curve, again, when I looked at some of the best lap times and stuff, I found a lot of people braking nowhere near as much as I was going through there. And again, I just like in our previous video, I sort of tried to replicate the process myself, repeat it over and over, and I couldn't quite nail it, so I kind of kept it as fast as I could. But I do realise that perhaps when I come round to this, and if I'm looking to improve, there is some time there that I can make up by sort of a little bit better braking and approaching it a little bit more better. But at the moment, as expected, not necessarily exciting race, actually one of the most boring races, but I've got a good 11-second, 12-second lead on the chap behind, and a 4-second gap to try and pull to the guy in front, which I wasn't particularly confident at, as they sort of seemed to get pulling away. But you know, I'm on track here to do a relatively decent lap time, 2:05. So in order for me to get that 2:03 qualifying time, I really pushed myself. I tried, you know, must have been practice for 30 or 40 laps before I managed to sort of really push myself down to a 2:03. So when I come into these races, I knew I'm probably going to be averaging around 2:04, 2:05. So that's something I was aware of when I was looking at the quali times and things. So, but again, just like my strategy scene, we've got a nice massive gap there between myself and 7th, and you know, not a insurmountable gap to oh, so there, big mistake there, my first big mistake, come off the track. Now it's fortunate that I've got a bit of time there, but can I get myself back together before? So we're off again. That gap of 14 seconds I imagine is now closed a lot. Yeah, we're now down to 2.5 seconds, so I've really put myself under pressure here. I just need to keep calm. So yeah, when I was going through that S-bend, I think on the first S I just went to a little bit too quick, which meant when I come through to the second one, just had a little bit too much speed come around the corner. I couldn't control it and come off the track at the end, and as you saw, I lost my grip and lost my control. Really fortunate though that I'd already built a massive lead on our Italian friend in 7th place as we come round the hairpin, with the gap now a lot more smaller. However, if I can sort of keep my head cool and keep myself on the track and keep myself in the 2:04 range going into lap 4, then you know I should be able to hold the 6th place. As you can see, the gap is already starting to build between myself and 7th. I've got the pace on him, and fortunately I had a large enough gap that the mistake, which could have been much worse than any other race, could have lost a lot of places there. I was very fortunate to come out of that and still retain 6th place. So I think what happened there, and I think when I look back on this race, I think, is I was trying my best to make some time up on the Mexican in 5th, because I found the gap was slowly getting down, so I was really pushing, and perhaps I just pushed too hard and trying to close down a gap which realistically I'm not going to close down that kind of gap in 2 laps and also find an opportunity to overtake. So you know, perhaps should have put on my sensible head and just, you know, try and coast through the laps at 2:05 at a nice easy pace and not put myself at risk. You can see now I've sort of extended that gap to 5.5 seconds, but from the car behind me, but a good 20-second gap to the car in front as we come back through the S-bends. A little bit more careful this time, and we haven't come off, so that's fantastic. And we are again coming up through towards a Dunlop curve on the last lap. It looks like 6th. We started the race, we've not lost that position, we've not gained any positions, and it's looking highly likely, unless again I do something stupid and come off track, that 6th is going to be the position that we retain through this. As we come back down now towards the hairpin. So yeah, we've got 2 races that we're going to look through today. I did this race. This is my first race I took part in Suzuka. I think it's important to see the first race, because that's kind of like the pure experience, like how I've gone from practice to quality into the actual race. So I think it's important, even though it's not, again, not the most exciting race. We had a little bit of excitement coming off track, and something that I'd say my first big error in GT Sport Online. But as I said, for that mistake I'd already built a massive gap, and you can see that gap is again starting to build again between myself and 7th. So we're looking pretty safe here as we come to the last couple turns of this race. Coming down the back straight now. This lovely turn here that I really like doing. You only have to come off the throttle, sort of half throttle it as you come round. And we're coming now into a Casio triangle, and coming down now into the final stretch to finish the race. So a sensible 6th. We didn't sort of climb, we didn't drop. A nice boring graph at the end that we'll probably not see, because there's no point me showing you a flat line of me staying in 6th consistently. But that's the end screen there. We can see best lap time 2:04.8, little sort of about a second away from my quali time. And again, you can see the result seems pretty fair. The best time in best lap in the 5th position was 2:01, and I would have struggled to close down that gap. So we're going now into our next race. The qualification's a little bit poorer this time, down in 8th, but you can see the timings around me. When they pop back up here, you'll see the timings around me are a lot more closer. So when I come into this race, I expected it to be a lot closer. I didn't expect any sort of huge gaps between myself, and I'm really competing with maybe the 1 or 2 cars in front of me and 3 or 4 cars behind me. So I expect this race to be a little bit more competitive. But yeah, we're starting in 8th. In general, I'm trying to target myself, because obviously you can't really control it that much, and the way the GT Sport matchmaking works is you set your qualification time, you press on I'm ready to start a race, and then it matches you up with a bunch of people, and it checks all your qualification times and puts you in the grid. So it's kind of sometimes a bit of a luck of a draw about who you get matched up with as well. My main target at the minute is trying to finish races in the top half if I can, and try and race consistently and boost up the safety rating that I've got, which is currently set at B. So I have a B safety rating, and I want to get that up. So you can see here, just started off the race, coming up to the S-curves, my dreaded S-curves. We're just going to try and keep everything nice and tight and together, and see if we can perhaps build a bit of a gap. That's already starting to sort of come between myself and 9th. So we've got the Spanish in front of me. Nice little distance. See if I can keep that distance within 1 second or half a second. Means that I can use the slipstream when we get round onto the straights, making sure that I can pull away and make a bit of a gap. So you can see we're coming round now to the hairpin. No real action happening at the minute. Everyone's kind of keeping their line and keeping relatively straight around this area of the race. So this course itself, I have to admit, if I put my hand on my heart, I'm not a massive fan of this course. I don't know what it is about it. It's just I don't know whether it's because I'm just not doing as well as I was on the last a circuit on a Dragon Trail, or whether or not I found this track much harder. Like I said, I had to eventually give in and put on the traction control. So you can see, just kind of similar to this last race, there seems to be a gap building up either side of me. The people in 7th seem to be pulling away, and 9th behind me seems to be slowing behind. But there's been an accident, and looks like someone's come off, and I've managed to climb a position there. You can see there was a yellow flag warning that there had been an accident. And now we've pulled ahead of Porsche 911, which I believe qualified in 5th. And I was aware of at the time, so that Brit that's behind me, I was relatively certain it's going to have a faster pace than me when we start sort of really starting to get into time. So I can see in front of me there's someone who's got a penalty there, so something I was also quite aware of, that if I can keep this gap, that I might be able to gain some space when the penalty's hit. And they've both come off there, and this is a nice opportunity to gain another couple of positions. You can see the 911 there creeping up behind me, ever closing that gap, so very aware of that, but very pleased to be in 5th. And this is just like I said at the time, there will be times where perhaps you will see a nice overtake on a back straight, or going around someone on the outside or something like that. But what I'm finding in GT Sport, you're looking, well, certainly me as a noob who's still relatively new to all this, is just looking to stay on track, keep a decent pace, and stay consistent. If you can do that, there's always going to be a few people who will kill themselves off, smash into somebody else, or wipe themselves off track. And if you can just keep that consistency, you should, well, I found it in quite a lot of other games anyway, you should be able to maintain a decent place anyway. And from there you can start improving and try and push yourself up to the top of the grid. So you can see here the 911 really starting to make some gains on me. I'm really pushing hard to make some distance between us, and make sure he can't use the slipstream to gain on me anymore. We still have 4th place in view as well, so you know, let's not disregard that yet as we come through to a Casio triangle, a nice little tight chicane at the end of the lap. So the Spanish in 4th, we've got them in sight still. Can't see the time difference at the moment, but hopefully we'll flip to an in shot where we can see them. The 911 again, closing that gap behind me. Maintain the consistency. We've only got 2 more laps left. I may be able to hold him off as we come round into the S curve again. Making sure I don't lose too much time. And oh god, I've come off on the same point again, exact same point of the last race. Now we've managed to lose 6th and the 911's gone up, but nowhere near as bad as the last race where I sort of come off and turned and hit the wall. I managed to salvage it and get back on track, so I didn't lose too much time, but obviously you can see there I lost a lot of time. Now what was interesting, when I was getting chased there by the 911 on lap 2, I managed to clock a 2:03.6, which is just slightly under my qualifying lap, which again I'm pleased that when it comes to the race I was able to turn up and actually do better, put in a better time than I did in quali, which I have to admit it took me a long time to get that down to 2:03. A lot of messing around with the traction, coming off track, sliding off here and there, pushing too hard on certain corners, a lot of trying to work it out. So yeah, I'm very pleased to pull that out in the middle of the race. So we're in 6th position here, so we still have gained 2 positions for where we started in 8th. We've got the Israeli behind us, and we've got the 911 in front of us. 911 in front's got a nice big gap, but I've also got a relatively nice gap behind me that, providing I don't do anything stupid, I should maintain until the end of this race. So we're coming through now into a Casio triangle again for the 3rd time in this race. I've sort of hit that a bit poorly, didn't hit the initial apex right there, and drifted a little bit too hard, so probably lost a little bit of time through there. So we come back now to look at the final lap. So I lost 7 seconds when I come off there. I lost a bit of time definitely coming off track. So we come through to the first curve and into the second, which took me a while to work out how to get that quite right, but looks like I've got that right there. And again, our friends, the S-curves. So let's make sure this is where I come off last time. No, it seemed to manage to hold that and come through there with a much more sensible speed. So you can see behind me, the Israeli in 7th place does actually have a penalty over his head. So that gives me a little bit of breathing space in terms of worrying about the gap between me and him, which is actually starting to close. Although he does have behind him a South African as well, who, from what I remember the qualification, he was one of the unknowns who started at the back of the grid, so we can safely assume he's been working his way up and possibly again might have the pace on me. So, but I think we're fair enough in this race now that, providing again don't do anything stupid, we should be able to very nicely be able to see this through. So as we come round heading down towards Spoon Curve, again, just trying to maintain a position now. A 6th place finish, although it's the same place finish as we did on the last race. Again, it's something I'm pleased about. I'm in the top half of the race. Managed to not lose any positions from where I started. It's a shame I couldn't hold off the 911 for 5th place. Although I do kind of feel that hadn't I gone off, he would have definitely been riding me for sort of a lap and a half, looking for his overtake opportunity, which he probably would have had on the back straight. But you know, it would have been interesting. Hopefully a lesson to be learned of trying not to let the chaser apply pressure, because I find, you know, a few races I've done, you put a bit of pressure on somebody. Some of the unranked races I've done, put a bit of pressure on someone who's not very experienced and they all come off, and that is the end of the race. You can see I maintained my 6th position. The South African, as I said, sort of took over the Israeli and finished in 7th. A good race there. We managed to finish on a 2:05, so you know, nothing too pushy, but again, just a nice consistent lap. I got a boost on my safety rating, which, you know, went from B to A, which is really what I'm aiming to do. And you can see my driving rating and my air race went up to D as well. So we are making improvements in our safety rating and our driver rating. In the lap chart itself, you can see we sort of started here in 6th, then moving into 2nd lap, we went into 5th. Then 3rd, we sort of lost that position when we come off track and maintained 6th to the end of the race. So yeah, that was my first few races on a Suzuka Circuit. I hope you guys enjoyed it and found it, you know, maybe learned something. Probably didn't learn anything, let's be honest. But yeah, that is it for me today. We'll be back round when the daily races recycle, and we'll see what circuit we come up against. And there should be a stream on Thursday, which I might do some more of a Suzuka Circuit, or I might do something else. But if you're interested, drop in and say hi. All right, guys. Cheers.